IVM.
This is Audiogyan, and I am your host, Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world.
Welcome to a brand new series of Audiogyan. It's been quite some time. The new series is called Where Are the Designers? It's a 12-part series featuring few of the top influential design leaders talking about their hiring process, challenges in finding and retaining talent, and some tips for young designers to make a cut after they apply. I'm so happy and proud to introduce my co-host for this series, Abhinit Tiwari. He was actually heading the design at Gojek, but surprisingly likes to call himself like designer at Gojek. So welcome, Abhinit. Welcome to the show. It's actually the other way around. You can also welcome me because you'll be co-hosting this series.
Hey Kedar, thanks for having me here. And
Yeah.
yes, super excited about this series. I really saw the list of people you managed to line up for the series.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm super excited about talking to these people, specifically about design hiring, because that's an evergreen topic. And I'm looking forward to having these conversations and learning something from each of our guests.
Same, yeah. In fact, to begin the series, we have requested Jay Dutta to join us. Jay Dutta is heading the design at Make My Trip and Go Ibibo. He's also the co-founder of DesignUp, one of the most sought-after design conferences in Southeast Asia. And I think I had interviewed him in episode number 80, where we spoke about role of design in startups. So it was quite a one should go and listen to that episode also. So yeah, without further delay, welcome Jay. Welcome back, Jay, actually to Audiogyan.
Hey, thanks so much, Kedar, and thanks so much, Abhinit, for having me here once again. It's always a pleasure to be back on Audiogyan. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's our honor altogether. So यार वही है कि मतलब I've been chatting with Abhinit about this series, Where Are the Designers, and just wanted to pick brains of few of the designers and understand what are their challenges, because I've been hiring for quite some time, and it's kind of difficult to hire mid-level senior folks across the board actually, right? And I probably would have a different mindset because I come from ClearTrip, then Book My Show, and there's a different kind of pedigree to different companies. So I just thought to do this series and get a wider perspective of, are the challenges same? How are you handling it? How do you spot the talent and stuff like that? So yeah, I mean, that's anything to add, Abhinit? You have any particular take?
No, I'm just looking forward to hearing from Jay what he's been doing about hiring designers in all the companies that he's been at. Who's going to kick it off, Kedar? You or me?
I'll take the first question and then maybe you can chime along.
Sure.
So, Jay, there are a bunch of questions. A few of them, actually, it's not a rapid fire round, but we'll have like few of them really quick and short ones. Just sort of rapid fire, but yeah, you can just take your time as well. And then there are like few questions which are much more in depth, and we can deep dive into what's the process like and stuff. So, just to start off, how long you have been in design, and if you can give us quick background about you, when did you start hiring? Who was the first person whom you hired, if you remember? Where was it? And yeah, any insights from there?
Right. I think I've been in design fairly long, like I guess maybe similar to Abhinit and you, or maybe a little longer. I was actually trying to remember, as you were framing the question, how long have I been hiring? I think it goes back to 1998 or 99. This is while I was pretty much an independent charge of a growing team in Mauritius. And one of my, I can't remember who was the first hire. I think I might have contributed to some folks. But one of the interesting assignments I do remember was hiring my replacement. So I had replaced this French designer from Paris, and I had shortlisted this wonderful designer who worked for the Grand Canyon National Parks. I mean, it finally never happened. I mean, but she and I have remained friends, but we have never met. Hopefully, after the pandemic, who knows?
Okay.
So Jay, yeah, I was 12 years old then, so you've definitely been in design way long. Not even close.
Yeah, even I think I was in 10th, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
So yeah, not to make you feel old, but following on from the hiring conversation, let's talk about sourcing first. Like that's the title of our series as well. Where are the designers? So how does it work for you currently where you're at, or even in the past? Like, does the HR help you do all the sourcing? Do they have a pool of designers, or do you take charge of it yourself, or your design team does?
So I think HR owns the process, and we essentially help them add, maintain, expand, and refine the pool. I tend to think of hiring process as a product flow. The pool is really the mouth of the funnel, and from there, the bunch of steps. I guess we may not be very different in the way we do that. I think the first step really is shortlisting candidates based on CV, portfolio, referrals, or chat. The second step is the assignment, and the third is, of course, a couple of panel rounds. Post discussion with the members of the panel, I think the last round is usually with me, unless the person is a very, very senior person, in which case it might be with some of my peers in product or tech.
Sure.
Okay.
I just wanted to check in on one more thing, which is how important are referrals for you for sourcing? Right. I've seen people have different kind of a take on this. Some people love it. Some people find referrals problematic for some reason. What's your take on referrals? How big a part is it?
Right.
Your hiring
I think
process?
referrals are still fairly effective, though you need to handle referrals a little more sensitively. I think that's the problem part also, because these are people that are known to people inside your organization. So you should not mess up that relationship per se. But I think going back to referrals is that people don't buy things, they buy into people. And then they essentially buy into promises and words and beliefs. And this is what I think referrals are all about. It's a human chain of trust. So I think, yeah, it still works.
That's an interesting bit.
Yeah.
Human chain of trust. Kida?
Yeah. And I mean, you briefly covered what is the typical hiring process, but has it changed over time? I mean, since the time when you started hiring, and because we have different tests, right? And we keep refining them for different levels. And sometimes the company culture also lends itself to how you hire. So have you seen any change in your design hiring process?
I think broadly the process remains the same, but I think there's a lot of fine tuning and attention to details and lots of small parts which we have fine tuned, or which I have fine tuned. I mean, when I first started hiring, this was my second job, and I started, I think, managing hiring things pretty early in my career. So obviously I made my set of mistakes and stupid things as well. But again, using the product flow analogy, I think what we have done over a period of time, and this is again a lot of learning at Adobe and again at Make My Trip as well, which is paying a lot of attention to the pool. I mean, and paying a lot of attention to the rejections and all the steps. I think what's happening, why are we rejecting less or more somewhere, and what should the ratio be? So we also very openly discuss and introspect about bias. We train a lot of younger people to interview. So a lot of younger people shadow the older members, such. Also because I think that also brings an interesting diversity to the hiring panel as well. The other part is a few key panel members, and this is happening more at Make My Trip, is that they own the journey of a candidate across various stages. So if there are 4 or 5 key people, they would probably own 4 or 5 candidates. So roughly at any point of time, there are about 20 people who are kind of looked after very well. So we actually have a lot of openings and design leaders across verticals and across 2 brands. But I think one of the things that we have mandated is that at the start, we are thinking of a common pool and really evaluating the fit as we go along. The saying we have is this, that, you plant a tree whose fruits or shade you may not enjoy, but eventually you'll grow the forest.
Wow.
And the other part, of course, is that sometimes people will jump from a vertical to the other. So I think if you're hiring good people, if you're hiring the right people, I think it's you're investing somewhere down the line as well. The last point, of course, is that assignments have become much more modularized. So they've become much more smaller, shorter, sharper, very varied. And I think it's the kind of thing even I would have fun taking. So I think that's what we have done, a lot of tweaking along the way.
Mm-hmm. Actually, just to deep dive a bit into this, that you must have, like, everyone must have seen those LinkedIn posts where young fresh candidates, or sometimes even experienced ones, say that either you pay us for the assignment or then whatever, like those sort of reactions are there, right? And sometimes there's also controversial topic about whether the test should be from the same domain or like a neutral domain. Any insights there?
Yeah, I think so. We have discussed this quite a lot. And again, some of my colleagues in Adobe days also we discussed this. But I think it's always good, especially, I mean, of course, there are very senior folks and sometimes you cannot give them tests. So the test won't really check them out. And there are other ways. I think the whole idea of testing or evaluating may not necessarily be an assignment. So I think I agree on that part. However, the interesting part here is that I don't believe that you should give a test from the same domain. We have increasingly veered away into something very creative, very different sort of thing. Like, for example, designing for a music shop or a magic shop or anything different. And part of it is really about the assignment is not the assignment necessarily, but how you actually are kind of going through the entire process. I mean, what you talk about with the designers when you actually meet and you say you cannot do the process, or how do you actually negotiate all of these kind of touch points with the HR, with the person. So I think that says a lot about the person as well. So I think I would still stick to the assignment, maybe smaller, because I'm very conscious that people don't have much time. So can we actually say that this assignment can be done in 2 hours? That's the max that you should be taking, or 3 hours or 4 hours, but it shouldn't be a big piece which takes you like 2 weekends. And I think that's wrong, actually.
Quite interesting.
Jay, I want to talk a bit about something you mentioned in passing, which is diversity in design teams, right? So and I don't think this is just a design issue, tech industry overall, especially in India, if you look at that from a distance, it's mostly dudes, mostly from big towns and have had an English based education. How do you maintain diversity in the teams? Is it a conscious effort, or do you find the right balance of talent organically?
Right. I think diversity has been something very much on our agenda. And I think it's something very much of a very conscious effort, I would say. In the last year, I think we roughly hired some 55 people. I think some 41 new positions, which is actually quite a lot.
In the design team?
In the design team,
wow.
Entirely.
Wow.
So it's like a big jump for us. But a lot of them were, of course, some were replacements, some were interns, etc., etc. So I would kind of contractors and a whole lot of them. And interestingly, 41% of these were women. And the way we do it is not really setting any institutional targets. I think if you have to have a sustainable change, then there are a couple of process tweaks that essentially need to be done. So like in every panel, we at least have one woman, and I think maybe more in many cases. We increasingly have a lot of more women managers and senior folks in the team itself. And many of them will have a veto in the entire interview process. So I have greatly come to trust their intuition, skill, and judgment. And I think what the core hiring team shares is that it's about diversity really across gender, across locations, so not necessarily all metro folks, but and we have actually very interestingly people from Indore and Nagpur and Coimbatore and all sorts of places, and places that you might not even have heard about, different schools, people who are familiar with certain languages more, and for them English maybe a little bit of struggle, which is perfectly okay. We also make sure that we have a good balance between people who are design trained versus non-trained. So I think we do look at it overall and just want to make sure that it's not that you don't really end up with a whole bunch of very similar people, like people urban people, let's say from certain schools, etc. So it's a good mix that we try and shuffle. So that's what we do typically.
Wow, that sounds very
Nice.
idealistic and romantic. Actually, I don't know, Jay, like because it's Make My Trip or whether I am living in a different bubble altogether. Because I think it will be interesting journey as we go along doing these interviews, because right from like the chaotic startup world where the HR doesn't know how many people I need, to like a more organized setup, like Make My Trip is going to be an interesting ride. But so you mentioned about interns also, right? So like how feasible it is to have internship. I mean, it's very required, but due to like timelines and pressures, you really don't get time to mentor or give them assignments, make sure they have a good case study to put up in their college, and then probably the next job which they land up in, or probably continue in the same company. So internships, how does that work, at least at Make My Trip, and if you have any other examples?
Sure. And I think just to add to that last question and my response, actually, I think a lot of these are actually learned the hard way, because there were in a couple of earlier ones where I don't think we paid a lot of attention, not to the gender diversity, but the diversity of design trained versus non-design trained people from kind of urban versus non-urban areas, etc. And I think increasingly we need to reflect the same diversity which our users have. And I think I've learned it the hard way. So maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have thought about it, but I've kind of made my own set of mistakes and learned it the hard way. So I think this is probably a good place where I'm kind of thinking much more structurally, as opposed to kind of repeating any of those past mistakes.
And sorry to interrupt, but and just to add and tell every listener that when I was thinking of this series, it was Jay who told me that you should have like again like an equal contribution of women design leaders in the industry also. So it is not a conscious thing that you slip, but it's just a pattern that you observe. You hang out with those people, and then it just becomes part of your system, right? So you have to take those conscious efforts sometimes to address these sort of important issues, right? So yeah, thanks Jay for that. But yeah, go ahead.
No, absolutely. I think that, and I think sometimes you don't willfully make those slips; it just happens.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, absolutely. So coming back to internships, I mean, we have always supported internships, but 2020 was a very hard time. I mean, suddenly our work pressure went up because we were trying a lot of new things. We had this remote scenario, and so we just realized we couldn't do it. But in 2021, we devised a program to specifically address interns called Early Check-in. And we are also very interestingly gearing up for interns and DesignUp. So we have just been talking to a few folks, especially since a lot of internship programs have been disrupted. I think this is the least we can do for these folks. And I think it'll be a drop in the ocean, but yeah, in little ways we can try and do things.
Sure. So this one is like a more leading yes or no type question. So what's like a deal breaker for you? Attitude or aptitude?
Attitude.
Okay.
Right.
Now I'll come to this question much more deeper in the following up. But yeah, this was just a quick warm up kind of a thing.
That reminds me of that quote from a Manchester United manager who said, "I'd rather have a hole in my squad than have an asshole in my squad."
Right.
I don't know if profanity is allowed in the podcast.
Bindas, no problem.
He'll do a beep anyway, kind of one big beep.
So, yeah. Jay, I wanted to know, is there such a thing as Jay's favorite interview question for designers?
So I actually have a collection of questions which I have, over a period of time, I keep shuffling and asking people. But one of the questions I like and I mean, people might get is that, would you rather be the best player on a losing team or the worst player on a winning team?
Wow, that's quite interesting.
So I have a bunch of questions like these, which I kind of rotate. And I mean, there are 5-6 of them, including if you were a vegetable, what vegetable would you be?
And what's the thought process? Is it just to understand the vibe, or is it all like what all do you quickly try and gauge from, like how fast the response comes, or any other parameters that you gauge with?
So I think it's not, I do tell them that it's not about the speed part of it, but and I think it's just to understand how people think. And I really appreciate people who think very differently from me, because I wouldn't have thought it this way. This is pretty interesting. So I have a bunch of questions like these which would make them think. So it's not a standard interview question, but it also makes me think, and then makes me think, what would I have actually said in this one? And this is like, wow, this guy's actually said a very interesting thing. I would have never thought about it. I think it's not about the answer, but how do you even think about the answer, or how do you even structure the answer?
Interesting.
Nice. Cool. So we'll move on to the next section.
Yeah,
I
sure.
guess,
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, Jay, this is a pretty cliched question, but we have to ask it. What are some top qualities, if you need a number, then just 3, that you look for in a designer when you're hiring them?
Right. I think this reminds me of Kedar's earlier question as well. So I would have really liked to say attitude, attitude. And it definitely makes a good headline, but that's not necessarily the whole truth. So the top 3, since you said 3, really are, of course, attitude, because it's the approach to work, the work ethic, the willingness to apply yourself, the willingness to work with others to get things done. And sometimes you disagree, but you say, okay, I'll disagree and agree, and we'll get it done anyway, kind of, and we'll check it out, kind of. So I think a lot of that is very, very important. The second, actually, which actually it could be very well my first as well, is curiosity. And I think that I feel is what makes you go far. When you learn, change, reinvent, thanks to curiosity. And in some ways, those questions I was talking about is also about curiosity. How do you see things from a different angle? Not necessarily right or wrong, but different. That's probably the whole thing. The third for me is perseverance. And I think the good ones are the ones who really are patient, persevering, persistent. They're the guys who are super dogged, unwilling to give up a good fight, and will continue for years at certain things. And in some ways, design is also like research, or if you think about sciences, I think people they go deeper and deeper. So I think perseverance also kind of demands that you work with teams, stakeholders, or data, to get things to a conclusion or to get things moving. And I think just suddenly I realized, and let me add a bonus 4th, I spoke about 2 common strands out here, which is teamwork. And I think I feel the age of individual superheroes is kind of getting over. So when we were growing up and we were like getting into design, we were surrounded by superheroes, that one-man show. But I think today that's not really true. You have design leaders and lots of individual kind of stars. But I think collectively, including product, tech, data, and business, that's where we are like the Avengers. Individually, we may not be as effective because we build big things. So that's the other part of it.
That's really interesting. And if I may add to that, given that these are the top 4 things you're looking for, how do you feel about the state of talent that we have in the industry right now? Like, what would you say a success rate is in finding these 4 traits that you mentioned in the candidates that you talk to these days?
So I think I would say it's gotten better. We have, I think, ups and downs where we will see certain. So I think, okay, let me just put it the other way around, and which is an advantage that we have today. And I think, Abhinit, you might have it. I'm not sure if that is the case with Kedar, but when you are part of a very large design org, you are probably able to get a few people who will have a promise of some of these. They may not be there yet. But because you have a large team, you know that you could take a bet on some of these people and groom them and just get them ready. So in that sense, I feel I'm in a good place. Are we getting people like this? Are we getting people with all the 4 traits? The answer would be no. But at the same time, if you sift through things, if you actually look around and go deeper, then you will probably be able to find quite a few decent people. Actually, in my recent, through the pandemic, we had a fairly big hiring drive, and I'm pleasantly surprised actually in the especially last 3 to 4 months. I guess we applied ourselves super hard to find those people. We work closely with HR. So I'm actually very optimistic. I'm seeing some good people out there.
Nice. It's good to hear some hopeful comments.
Correct. Hey, let's take a short break here.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IBM Podcast Network. On the Edges and Sledges Cricket Podcast, in the first half, Ashwin is joined by Varun to wrap India's ODI tour of Sri Lanka. In the second half, DJ joins the party to discuss the first T20 international between India and Sri Lanka. If you'd like to hear more about this match, former Indian cricketer Sabha Karim joins Rajiv Mishra on Khel Niti and they talk some more about it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're really excited to announce a new show, a show about crypto with Rohan Joshi. He's going to dive deep and demystify all this crypto stuff that we've been hearing about. And let me tell you a little bit more about stuff that's going on the network really quickly. Congratulations to Maru Kinayat, who celebrates 50 episodes of The Note with a discussion on health as a fundamental right. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam talks to Harsha Chetanwala of mywealthgrow.com. Zarina Poonawala is starting a new miniseries on emotional intelligence. Do check out the kickoff episode on the Empowering series. And Simplified talks about semiconductors. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show, or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. That's really helpful for us. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors on the network this week. They make this all possible. Thank you very much. Ciet, Cred, Global Victoria, Bank of Baroda, Intuit India, Lenovo, and CoinSwitch Kuber. We really appreciate your support.
Okay, welcome back to the show. Jay, so actually I wanted to interject for this question particularly is that one of the reasons why I also thought of this series was a lot of times what happens is while hiring talent, we have these good soft keywords which helps in building a great culture, a great team, and thereby bringing a great output. But a lot of times it also happens that you don't find the right skill set also, right? I mean, I've been doing some small workshops here and there in especially tier 3 towns of and design school like Ujjain mein kuch hai, and there are a bunch of places where I talk, and these people are really passionate, may have those skills which you spoke about, perseverance and good attitude, but they may lack basic skills of how to write a resume or how to put out a case study with a good framework so that the potential recruiter just likes it, right? So what you spoke about was more of the soft skills. Are there any hard skills which you are like sort of deal breaker for you, or you think it's mandatory at this level, right? You can pick any level because I'm sure you must be hiring directly at a very senior level and not probably like a junior designer. But are there any hard skills that you look for?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Kedar. And actually, we do hire quite a bit of a mix of people. And increasingly, we have been hiring more recently some of the younger folks. And definitely, I think what I look for is, and also because talking about a big team, also which means that we are now looking for specialist skills. So, for example, someone who's good with motion graphics or someone who's just good with illustrations. They may not necessarily be great with articulating in English, pretty much like what you said, Kedar. We actually hired someone like that. And if we had just kind of purely seen his resume, it wasn't great. But I think we did have a quick conversation with him, which led to someone saying, okay, let's dig down a little more. And we realized, God, this guy is like really talented. And it's just that he's been out there. This guy is not got a full-time job. So he's been working pretty much like intern from a company to company. So I think I do believe in giving breaks to people like that. And I remember one guy came from a back of beyond town in, I think, Sundarbans. This is during my Adobe time. And this guy couldn't write English properly. He could not speak English, that is for sure. He could not speak good Hindi also. But we had a conversation with him and he was super talented. And this guy, we offered him a contract role because Adobe was not willing to bend and give him a full-time offer because he didn't have all those degrees and things like that. But he's eventually moved on to Samsung and then a very good role with Philips today. So still in contact, he's still a volunteer for DesignUp, keeps coming. But it's so wonderful to see people like them grow and just looking for a foothold, an opportunity, and they will grow absolutely.
Wow, that's quite interesting and inspiring to hear that story. So what would you say are sort of the bigger challenges? I mean, if you just to put a number, you can start with two big challenges today while hiring designers, and why? And to follow that question is also about which the conversation which we keep having offline about whether we should go to these schools as mentors, do alumni play a part in it, and so that is where it's leading to. But we can start off by you telling us like two biggest challenges which you face while hiring designers.
Right. I think, again, interesting question. And when I think about hiring, and also what happens is that now increasingly I'm looking more at the cultural fit, the will this person be around for some time, will the person settle in, contribute, etc. So I think in some ways good hiring is like making a bet that this person will enjoy the role, grow, contribute, and happy. I mean, in a sense, it's a win-win bet. What the team, the earlier panel do check in is more to do with the skills, the hard skills, the detailing, etc., etc. And I think the assignment to some extent tests that as well. So when I look back at it, I think this year, I mean, this last 1 year, we've made 55 offers, or you could say 55 bets. Out of these, two were wrong. I think we made two wrong bets. Again, from a proportionate point of view, that's like roughly some 3 to 4% times we were wrong out of 100. So, which is not bad. The real challenge I feel is that most hiring processes are geared to judge your past. I mean, you know this mutual fund literature, right? That past performance is no guarantee of future whatever performance or growth or whatever kind of thing. It's a bit like that. It's trying to sort of look at those dots in the past and trying to sort of extrapolate them and say, how will this actually play out overall? This I find is a very big challenge. I mean, skill is okay. I mean, what if your skill is really good, but you stagnate and you don't pick up anything new? So you could just be in the same place for 3 years or 4 years for all we know. So I think this for me is the top notch challenge. How do I envision, extrapolate this person's growth? And I think that person also has to be happy growing within our organization. I think both parts really kind of thing. So the refinement and learning really is in the area of evaluation and bias. I mean, am I biased in, or is the team biased in looking at extrapolation or the evaluation? That's where I think we need to look much more deeply at some of those things and just kind of not be biased by anything. So one very interesting example, I mean, two examples actually, was that in the middle of all this remote hiring, there were two instances where this whole technology played truant. I think one person was in a very small town in UP, and I think the net kept getting disconnected. I couldn't hear her. I think she got nervous. She couldn't hear me. So we said, if I carry on like this will definitely bias my view of this whole conversation. So let's stop it. Once you are ready and once you feel that things are set, or if you want to go somewhere else, take this, let us know. We'll hold off. I mean, there's no pressure right now for that. And we did this again, and I think it went really well. So I think those are the simple things where we need to be much more thoughtful and kind of just make sure that we are not giving any chance for biases to be introduced, because we might make a very wrong bet as well.
Interesting. So, Jay, taking on from what you mentioned earlier, right? You said you've been hiring since '98. All of us here know that design has gone through a sea change in the last 2 decades or so. I wonder, have you seen any changes in the aspirations of designers in India as well? Like now we have so many unicorns, so many companies looking for talent. So if you could talk about, like, do you see the aspirations changing a bit? Maybe from just getting an opportunity to now something more?
Yeah, I think aspirations have changed a lot. I mean, when I stepped out of design school to today, I think there's been so much change. I mean, I went back to school again, but not a design school. I did a cross school management plus design that was in the UK. But I think the aspiration in some ways was much more socialist, like 2 decades plus ago. The two things would probably be the mastery of what you do and designing for something you deeply care about. I think this is where probably what really fueled people once upon a time. And in some ways it became more even artsy at times as well. But what I see is that's a minority almost. That's a massive minority. It's a minority probably who doesn't care about a $1 million fundraise or whether the product is used by millions or not. I think that's become a complete minority.
Sure.
I find that, that whole internal fueled aspiration of mastery and meaning is kind of going down. The majority aspiration, which I see, would be really externally fueled. Working for a good brand, a brand that's in the news, a lot of PR coverage, great pay, fancy perks, fancy titles, a large team to manage, maybe even waiting for your Tesla and talking about it on Twitter. So actually, when I was thinking about it, it just crossed my mind. The other aspiration would be that maybe I have 5,000 to 10,000 followers on some assorted social media. I don't know if you guys remember, there's something called Clout.
Yeah.
Clout with a K.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Right. There used to be something called a Clout score, and that would calculate how much clout you have, etc. But then Clout is dead. Clout scores are dead as well. But it just crossed my mind that a lot of it is such externally fueled aspiration. But I really do hope that I'm wrong about the minority part, that there are many more people out there whose aspirations are driven by the intrinsic search for meaning and mastery. So I hope that kind of. So
you're sounding too romantic in a way, because even Kunal Shah said, "No, there are these logo collectors." I think in one of the podcasts which I heard, you're saying that there are these. Maybe that's what you're pointing towards, the minority group. They are mainly like logo collectors. They are not really much concerned about deep diving into the problem statement and then making like a good product, but just working in fancier brands.
No, I think I would say that's the majority one.
Acha, nice.
The majority one of the logo collectors, exactly like what you said. They're hopping from the brand, the most shiny brand, to the next shiny brand, and that's what. Whereas the other guys are probably more deeply concerned about. It's like a researcher. You just go deep down and you forget that. And you maybe at 10 years, you're doing the same thing and kind of really love doing it. So you don't really care about whether that's in the news or not.
Yeah, true.
But that's a good point about logo collectors.
Yeah, I think Brian Collins from the graphic design agency Collins, he once wrote a long piece about people confusing fame for mastery. I think, I resonate with you, Jay. I definitely see some of that happening.
Right. So actually, if you were at the DesignUp 2019 event, I think I've said this about 20 times already. Simon Rebaudengo from Italy, he lives and works in, I think, China, or used to. He was talking about how at age of 40, you become an apprentice in Italy. And by the time, if you survive all of that, by the age of 80 or 90, you are acknowledged as a master. It's just because the depth to which you keep going and doing things, things move slowly, but very, very surely. So I think true for a lot of cultures like either Japan or China, the ancient cultures, kind of where there's a lot of emphasis on craftsmanship and thoughtfulness and all of that.
No, even I'm a big believer of that. The quote I think that Bruce Lee has given, like you don't need to learn 1,000 kicks, but just one kick 1,000 times. So yeah, it clearly connects with me as well.
So while we're talking about this, we talked about aspirations in general, Jay. But if I had to ask you to differentiate between, say, the aspirations of young people looking to get in the industry versus more mid-level or senior designers who are here, would you see a difference? Do you see a nuance, a difference in aspiration between people who are new and people who've been here for some time?
Yeah, I think there is. I guess for the people who are new and waiting to get a foothold, I think the aspiration is possibly kind of making an impact with the skills they have and kind of shining out there with whatever they do. Then I think much more granular focus. They want to go to the next level and keep going. I think there is a lot of hope and a lot of aspiration out there. What I do see, and this is especially true for design in tech industries, is that as you go to the middle levels or more senior, I think I'm seeing a lot of burnout as well. All these things, whether it's a fancy title or a Tesla or whatever that you want, everything comes at a certain price. And a lot of people are not willing or able or shouldn't be even kind of be going there to do that? Because I guess a lot of our, especially Indian startups and Indian companies, don't really have that individual contributor pathway. I think everything for growth means that you got to be a manager, which may not be the right thing to do.
Yeah, that strikes a chord, Jay. Sorry for interrupting, but
right. No, I think
But
please go on, Abhinit.
Yeah. So since you brought on that IC versus manager thing, have you noticed this blog that Brian Lovin started a few days back, Staff.design?
No, I didn't, Abhinit. Maybe I think we should probably put that in the blog, not blog. I think
the show notes.
Show notes.
Yeah,
show box.
Yeah. So,
right.
So he's also interviewing a lot of ICs, and one of the things I was going to talk to you about was brain drain, right? That seems to be happening as the world gets more global, especially now we are all rushing towards being remote. So I've seen this in Indonesia as well, where I talked to some senior design folks, and a lot of people would, when they outgrow the companies here, they would take an offer in the Valley or take an offer in Singapore, which is quite close. And I've seen this happen in India as well. Do you have a lament regarding this brain drain? And also, do you think this is just a side effect of, sorry for calling ourselves leaders, but side effect of design leaders, quote unquote, being unable to create those IC opportunities within the companies that we work in?
I think there are a bunch of, very interesting question and a lot of strands to this. So very interestingly, Abhinit, when in 2000, when I landed a job in Bristol, England, after my Mauritius stint, my employers firstly thought that I was a Mauritian, and that's probably where they were kind of like, firstly, where is Mauritius? And I hope that's not Mauritania in Africa, so on and so forth. So I think the assumption, the complete stereotype was that Indians were coders, period. And I think Y2K had reinforced that. They just couldn't believe that Indians could be designers in the tech world. That was like, no. And I probably was the only Indian designer, someone who was not from UK or didn't have a half UK kind of lineage or studied in the UK, etc., who was actually working there. I guess it was also the person who hired me was very interesting and was very open with that diversity idea as well in those days. So I think that point of time, if I look back, I was in a tiny minority. But it's really makes me glad to see that we are also now seen as being good with design. And I think this holds true for Asians in general, that, these are not just the tech coders and, guys who work in NASA and all of that, but they can also design and adapt to cultural nuances, really, kind of. So I think I'm very happy in the decade after that I've come back to India. Indian design and designers have finally gone out to the world, and I think they're out there. The only reason I came back to India was that there were supersized projects to be done at scale right from inception. While in the West, I think, especially the West, not the Southeast Asia or other places, West, things have been already done. If you think about airports and infrastructure and, healthcare, etc., there is already a version 1 and a version 2 and a version 3 also, maybe that's done. So in majority of the cases, you would really be polishing what's done. And I think India provides that brand new opportunity. And I think India has not disappointed me.
So before we jump next, let's take a quick break.
Have you ever wondered where the business world is headed? How the ways in which we create, market, and sell to consumers will evolve? Or if we'll ever go back to wearing pants while working? For answers to all of this and more, tune into Advertising is Dead with me, Varun Tugirala. Every Tuesday, as I talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers from across business, media, marketing, and beyond. You can catch all episodes of Advertising is Dead on the IBM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from.
All right. So we are back here again.
Jay, you spoke a bit about the brain drain kind of thing. And as Abhinit also spoke about, is it lack of us creating an ecosystem where new talent and senior talent can thrive, or is it something else? So to extend that thing, whom would you keep or whom would you consider like important people or organizations in the entire scheme of things where the talent is growing, right? So we spoke about this offline, that how do we, like, who's responsible for maintaining the quality of designers, the quantity of designers, and what sort of ecosystem we build for them so that they aspire to work in India and solve Indian problems, right? So you have any thoughts around that? You have also been actively involved in teaching, mentoring, taking workshops. So you have any thoughts on that?
So let me try and split your question in two parts. One is that the whole part of responsible for the talent in India. And second is, I mean, for the talent to just come and grow in India, that's one. The second is for getting out of India. Maybe that's the second part of it. I think we have discussed that before, but let's go down a little bit more. In terms of responsible for the talent in India, I think there are three big influences. I think parents, schools, and mentors on the job. So very interestingly, while doing the deconstruct research in 2019-20, Ripul Kumar, who was leading the research part, remarked that no parent ever forced their children to get into design. But interestingly, children rejected the so-called safe choices made by their parents and moved from engineering to design. I think a silent rebellion in motion, and I'm so glad that they rebelled and chose their own paths. So that is one. I mean, kids saying, I hate engineering or whatever, or BBAs and all of that, and I want to do design. The second, of course, was a bunch of old schools like NID and IIT IDC and the rest. And then, of course, newer ones like MIT, Symbiosis, JKLU, NIFT, etc. So I see a lot of good talent, I mean, including some former engineers come out from those places. There is, of course, the rise of the boot camps, but I think it's too early to comment on that. So I'll not comment on that part. The big one, of course, are mentors in the job. I think they are critical. But all of these mentors are, of course, within an ecosystem. I mean, the company ecosystem or whatever. But if there are good mentors in good places, then talent really, really blooms. Coming to your second part, which is why are they leaving, given where they came from and where we are right now, I still think a lot of them don't leave. I think there is, of course, one part of it which leaves. Now, you could say that one perception is that the best people leave. I don't think so. I think people who leave, of course, leave because they want to try out something very new or very different. Sometimes they get married, they move. So I think all sorts of different things happen. It's maybe too naive to say that the best leave and the worst stay. I think that doesn't happen. Conversely, you will also see a lot of good people coming back to India and in the last 3 to 4 to 5 years as well, which is again great. I also see a lot of good people not willing to leave India. And the part of the reason is 2-3 things. I mean, especially when they go to mid-senior kind of positions, they have kids and all, they realize that, of course, you get paid in dollars and pounds and all of that, but your cost of living is also similarly very high. So that's probably one angle that they think about. The other is, of course, in terms of the kind of breadth and the depth of opportunity here, some of these organizations do offer you something which is very, very unique and very different. So I think there are some people leaving, some people coming back, and I believe a lot of people not going out of India or being in the Southeast Asian kind of job market pretty much. Also because the Southeast Asian job market in some ways is similar. I mean, not the same, of course, but in some ways relatable, similar, etc. So I think, again, I would say there's a lot of hope.
Abhinit, you have any take on this about, because you have been hiring in that part of the world also. So any observations there?
Well, I do think what I agree most strongly with Jay on is I do think that the growth in the last 4 or 5 years, right, the growth in market and the subsequent change in perception that it has brought along with it, like parents are seeing, and parents are a super important factor. I agree on that as well. Parents are seeing that design is a real career choice for designers. And with all these opportunities in the market, the reasons for leaving Southeast Asia are definitely fewer and fewer. So yeah, like I was nodding throughout what Jay was saying.
And the
Nice.
funny thing is, so many people wanting to set up a shop here in India. I mean, that's the
Oh
other
yeah.
very interesting one. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jay, I'll tell you, like the number of Indian folks and folks worldwide I'm seeing setting up or wanting to set up shops in Indonesia, for example.
Right.
That's also very heartening to see. Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
People are recognizing that these markets are going to explode in the next decade or so.
So I think it was maybe it was Julie Zhuo who told me that after all, maybe a third of the world's population lives between India to Indonesia to Malaysia, Philippines, all of that. So I think that's actually both a place for great talent and a great market.
Yep.
Yeah. And I would add to that saying great problems also.
Right.
Yep.
Right? Because
Very unique.
because it's quite diverse. Very unique problems, and the diversity is so huge that you can't really like lift a model from Valley and just plug it in and it will work, right? So even if the business model is working, there are so many unique challenges across the board, from ops to design to tech. So it's quite fascinating for me. So I might come across as in like यार क्यों जा रहे हैं छोड़ के इंडिया में इतना काम है तो but it's good to know the perspective कि हाँ there some people might leave for different reasons. Fair enough. Cool. I think I'll out of the list I'll conclude with the last question to Jay mainly, and also if Abhinit you can pitch in. What does it take to retain good talent, right? In the organization where you have worked with, in the kind of small, big entrepreneurial gigs that you try. I've seen these days a big trend of ESOPs, right? Just give them and then they are waiting across actually senior to mid or sometimes leadership level, obviously. So, like, yeah, what's your promise you make to your team to retain and grow as individuals, grow as designers, and also help the company?
Right. I think interesting one. So when I kind of pitch on behalf of Make My Trip and Go Ibibo, I think it's built on some 3-4 points. One is that we really are a solid multidisciplinary team. So you will get to work with us, learn from us, grow with us. So that's definitely one thing which people like a lot. At least I can tell from the number of people who accept those offers based on that. The second is an org culture. I mean, we went from being fairly ambivalent about design to putting design front and center of our product. So I think that's again a great story from how far design has come and how ingrained it is as a culture within the org itself. I mean, not the design culture, but as a part of the org culture. So interestingly, all people who join will have to sit through maybe 90 minutes of me giving them some design gyan and process and all of that. And that is anybody who joins. So that's the interesting part. The third is a chance to see your work in the hands of over 55 million customers. I mean, every month. I mean, and this is probably across Make My Trip and Go Ibibo. And there's a fourth, which is that we are a NASDAQ listed company, which has been around for 21 years. And I can't even remember when we became a unicorn. But which means that there's of course pay, but there are real ESOPs. I mean, these are real and not fictional or promissory sort of thing. So, of course, now when you think about startups, they can't make certain of these promises or most of these promises, but they do make astronomical hikes at times. But then again, I think the idea really is there's only so much that a hike can take you or kind of be sustainable over a period of time. I mean, between us, I'm sure we have seen enough of these companies who have been crazily hiring, been promising a lot, and then they've gone to being very sobering sort of valleys per se. I guess for a bunch of hiring managers out there or folks out there who are looking to sort of build their teams, you really have to think about what differentiates you and what's a promise that you can keep. I think that's very, very important, actually.
Mm-hmm. But do you think one of the reasons for doing this series was also to be very open about a lot of things which we are facing individually also? So I've seen some really good paymasters. So they retain talent just through good salaries, right? And unfortunately, sometimes they land up in outgrowing themselves and then it's neither a IC role, neither they can manage stuff. You know what I mean, right? You must have
Yep.
seen those sort of people in the industry. So what's your take on that? I mean, is it a good culture that we are building as design community?
Yeah, I think that's not a good culture, really, to be honest with you. I think when I look at, and we've seen a lot of these. I mean, people go through kind of sudden jumps, astronomical hikes, retention bonus, you name it, and they get it. But eventually, I think, I mean, when a company goes down or the career stagnates, eventually the individual loses. I think that's probably the sad part of it. And when designers or design leaders within this org are making that call, I think they have to think from a much more systemic perspective, that how will this play out in the next 3 to 4 to 5 years? Because at some point of time, they might be at a point where they are unaffordable as well. And I think it's good to get there gradually, as getting there in the first 5 or 6 or 7 years of your career, you've got like 30, 40-year career up ahead. So if you become unaffordable at 8 years, what will you do with your rest of your 22 or 25 years? I think that's actually a scary thought.
I think, Jay, the scariest thought for designers these days is that careers are 30 years long, because most people dream that
Exactly.
they'll retire at 40.
And then you go to another 45 or 50, and that's actually like in my mind, a fairly scary thought. So,
Yes, but I don't think like even when I was young, a young designer, I never imagined myself being a designer at 50. It just felt too far away. So I think all of us, it's like stock markets. All of us are, we are good at thinking short term. We want short term returns. And even though everybody will end up at the same place if you zoom out and look at 20 years, but people are just, it's not intuitive for people to think of careers in such decade long terms.
Yep.
Correct. And I have a different perspective to that, is that like, because of my career shift in the last 4-5 years, I've fortunate to work in places where they were setups, like big setups, right? So as in not as big as Microsoft, but whatever, they were established companies. And when you see the breadth of marketing, the ops, the logistics, and bunch of other things, you are just one more department, like probably the HR or whatever, right? Important, but you are just one of them. Now, how can one justify those sort of salaries, or those sort of I mean, and justify in a sense that you have to bring that much to the table, right? So do you think that design does, and then that's why these people are demanding, or they're looking forward, or they have those sort of aspirations?
No, I think this is a great question again. I think the problem is that when we think in terms of trends opposed to value, I think there is a mismatch. A trend will last for a certain amount. I mean, it may last for 6 months, year, 2 years, 3 years. But eventually someone will ask for what are the value that you are contributing. What's the value your department is actually giving? And I mean, the great part is that we are now part of much, much larger corporations than ever before. But if I look at it, some of the winners really are the small boutique studio owners who might just kind of cash out in the 50s pretty much. And so there is that, because they have actually shown the value of their small 30, 40, 50 people companies per se. But if you think of a 30, 40 or a 50 people or a 100 people studio within, I think it gets even more complicated. I mean, the ROI of design starts to come into question, and therefore the ROI of individuals and this whole angle which a large corporation will have, which is that, no one is indispensable. And that's the truth to a great extent, actually. Sorry, I went around a little bit in circles there, but some of the thoughts there.
Yeah.
No, that's perfectly fine.
Cool.
Actually, Abhinit, you also come from a studio, this thing. And
I thought it would sound like a self plug, but I related so hard.
Right.
No, you have more to share, Abhinit?
And
I mean, from your left shift.
no, I do think what Jay has said makes a lot of sense. My perspective has changed complete 180 degree, right? After actually witnessing scale, and I have felt what you felt, Kedar, which is, like I think John Maida got into some trouble for saying this, that design is a support function, right? And I think Daniel Burka also shared some thoughts on Twitter the other day, where like design is too infatuated with getting on the table and it doesn't know what it will do when it gets to the table, right? So I felt all of those things, and I do think that to some extent the market also has to, show and show that design is a differentiator for them when they make the consumers make the choices of picking a product. And that's something I think Southeast Asia will see in the next decade. But I can't say that the market is voting for design being the differentiator yet. And that's when, as Jay said, true value will be created.
Yeah, true. In fact, I was talking with someone the other day that if you compare, there are probably, 300 universities in Maharashtra alone for engineering. So I don't know the numbers, but maybe 1,000 engineering colleges and universities across India, and probably 10 or 15 design schools. So the supply is low, and the demand is high doesn't mean that you'll get paid the way you are, right? You need to bring that value. It just right now, the demand supply kind of a thing, which is working for designers at the moment. Is it a fair perspective?
Kedar, I think we were doing this thing again for the deconstruct research as well, and it seems that number of schools have grown like crazy.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. I think there might be, for all you know, I think Shiva had that number somewhere. He was saying there are just 300 schools in Bangalore alone. And this is not counting the boot camps like the 10K designers and whatever kind of design something, all of those. It's just mushroom. Part of it is in let's say Triple IT or lots of these tech schools, which are bringing in design, and they also want to have. Now, NIDs are mushroomed. There are, I don't even know how many NIDs are there. IITs are teaching design everywhere.
Yep.
There's an master's in communication design or visual design at IIT Hyderabad, which is very interesting because I thought, why visual design kind of in my mind? So I think there might be a few thousand schools actually in design, which again means that it's imperative for the good ones to rise and shine.
But you think it's almost closing to the engineering, and also mind you, engineering are sort of established, right? So I'm not comparing a small boutique teaching class or like someone in Bangalore versus a IIT IDC center, right? Yep. So IDC, IIT, these NIDs are handpicked, they're like limited, right? So I'm not comparing those, but in terms of the big design schools, there's still a lot of disparity, right?
That's right. But I think what will also happen is that in something like a lovely professional university in Punjab, which is probably known for its business and tech and other courses, now there's a design course as well. So that's actually kind of, and it's kind of out there in huge numbers. The other question which boggles my mind is who's teaching?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Hopefully Audiogyan. Yeah, let's see. Cool. So Jay, I want to conclude, which is like especially for you, is that you started seeing some good work showcased at DesignUp, and as in like DesignUp is something which is one of the sought after conferences also. Have you seen any talent improvement, or you have any metrics to measure that? Because you've been very like an important contributor to just educate, to evangelize design at a larger scale, right? So any insights from your conference, and how is it helping? Anything worth knowing?
Right. I hope so, that I'm trying to evangelize. But so I think interesting questions. Let me just break it down into one or two parts. I think what happens is, while curating DesignUp, what we try and showcase work that has a very broad scope, scale, and a human story attached to it. I think what we try and bring is also diversity of people, of projects, of outcomes. And the idea really, if I think about it, is to provide alternate role models, not just the one that you hear or see on social media, primarily driven by fundraise or PR or titles and team sizes, etc. So very interestingly, there are two kind of metrics part to it. So one is that I very often hear people, and this includes even our own volunteers, that they say that in this edition or workshop, or this particular speaker that changed my life, that challenged me to think differently, they made me switch roles or paths. And the ROI for many of them is the reassurance, and for some of them it's all about the reinvention or rethinking part. But if you think about the real matrix in a slightly of the main path, maybe is that they are the individual stories which in some ways translate into DesignUp's own growth. So I think when I look at it, it's kind of doubled year on year till, of course, pandemic struck and we said, let's pause it for the moment. And the other part is like employees from now over 300 companies attended the 2019 edition, the 4th edition. And this is, by most standards, we are a very, very young conference. But what I love is the diversity of companies. I mean, you will have a small startup from Ujjain to Google. You will have ClearTrip and Make My Trip, Amazon and Flipkart. They're all united by learning, inspiration, and the love of design. So I think in some ways, I hope that is making some difference on the ground, and people are seeing beyond and finding newer role models. Probably that's the way of talking about it.
Cool. I think I'm done with the questions. It's been really pleasure to know so many things from you. Abhinit, you want to add or ask anything as a concluding thought?
No, thanks a lot, Jay, for taking out the time, and thank you for being patient with us running over time a bit. And
no worries at all. I hope our listeners will be patient, but it's always a great pleasure talking with both of you. And I think it's a bonus having you as well with Kedar. So great. I really enjoyed our conversation, and sorry if I went a little overboard on some of these.
No, we absolutely enjoyed it. And frankly, it's not about, because with Audiogyan, I've seen there are like very interesting feedback I'm getting from YouTube and Twitter and Instagram, and it's quite heartening to see the kind of things which come across, and hopefully the younger generation who wants to get into design learns a lot from this series over a period of time. And thanks, Jay. So on a concluding note, I'll say that thanks for listening till the end. Currently, I'm heading the design at Jupiter.money, and we are hiring at all levels. So you can visit jupiter.money/careers. You can follow Audiogyan on Instagram at Audiogyan Moments, or visit audiogyan.com. You guys want to plug anything? You guys are hiring. I'm sure Gojek is hiring all around the year at all levels. So any of you want to have a plug, feel free.
Jay, you go first. You're the guest.
Yeah, we are hiring, of course. But I think I also want to say that what a fantastic journey Audiogyan has been. And I think it's a labor of love from Kedar. So do keep listening, do keep recommending, and do keep sharing whatever your gyan is.
Thank you.
I think as Indians, we consume a lot, but I think we should also share a lot more. So I think that'll be fantastic. And I'll just double plug in Audiogyan on Audiogyan. So
thank you. But about Make My Trip and Go Ibibo, like you guys are hiring right now?
Yeah, we are hiring. We are always hiring. So there is, we would love to hear from you at any point in time. Just follow us on any of the social media channels. And the same goes for DesignUp. And hopefully we'll be back with something exciting soon. You will hear it first, maybe on Audiogyan itself.
Wow, that's great. In fact, that was one of the questions. I missed it. So any plans this year?
Yeah, there are actually. There is some pretty exciting stuff in the pipeline, but maybe not yet ready to be shared because it's work in progress. But yeah, very soon.
Awesome.
Nice.
Abhinit?
Yep, we at Gojek are hiring as well. All of you listeners, if anyone is interested, you can go to gojek.com/career. And yeah, you'll find positions across Southeast Asia there. And Kedar, thanks a lot. I've been a listener of this podcast for a really long time as well. It's really a privilege to be a co-host on this. And I had a really fun time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Abhinit. Thanks, Kedar.
Okay, thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. If you like this podcast, please don't forget to check our other interesting podcast on IVM Network. You can listen to us on IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or any of your favorite podcasting apps. To stay tuned, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at IVM Podcast. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at Audiogyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.
Eventually, you'll see the end of your childhood,
Get accustomed to womanhood.
enjoy the experience of sisterhood,
Might get to wifehood
or not, choose motherhood,
or not. You'll learn to define your personhood.
earn a livelihood,
Change the neighborhood.
and get rid of the falsehood that life post-academia is easy.
So join me, Ritasha,
And me, Ayushi,
on a journey from station starting point.
to station, what now?
Next station, Pudin station, and hopefully, Agla station, adulthood.
Fresh episodes out every Thursday.
Do you wonder why China does the things that it does? Or want to know how we could improve online privacy? Or perhaps you're thinking about how we can kickstart India's economy? If you'd like to search for the answers to such questions, check out All Things Policy, a daily public policy podcast that covers everything from employment figures to aircraft carriers. Tune in from Monday to Friday for new episodes and fresh takes.